Hello. The Divine Code reading for October 20th, pages 269 and 270. We are in the chapter Obligations to Revere and Fear God. Topic number 2. One who swears falsely in God's name. See Mishnah Lamelech Hilkot Malachim 10:7, which discuss whether false or vain oaths are included in the prohibition of blasphemy. However, the discussion is in regard to the prohibition and punishment, since there is no clear warning to Gentiles in the Torah about such oaths. Nevertheless, it is forbidden based on logic, since swearing in God's name in vain, and needless to say, doing so falsely, is a disgrace to his name, worse than uttering a divine name in vain. That was described in later in today's reading. Therefore, oaths that are a disgrace to his name are also forbidden. So there's a question as to whether or not it's a biblical prohibition. If it's a biblical prohibition, then it would be past a much higher level. But even if it's not a biblical prohibition, it's still a prohibition based on logic, that we should not, non-Jews should not make oaths in vain or false oaths. So one who swears falsely in God's name also desecrates his name, as it says in Leviticus 19:12, "You shall not swear in my name falsely, and desecrate the name of God. I am God." For by doing so, one denies the truth of the one whose name he swears by, since he effectively is saying that just as his words are false, so is the existence of God false. See Rambam, The Laws of Oaths, 12:1, and Ibn Ezra and Ramban on Exodus 27. It is likewise forbidden to lie or to falsely deny that he has promised or made an oath. Furthermore, one who changes his word is considered as if he serves idols. The commandment of this equivalence based on Sefer Hakinuk Commandment 70 and Hidushi Agot of Maral on Sanhedrin 92 is that the world's existence is God's speech, which is continually commanding that the world exist. Idol worship is like putting God's mouth in God's mouth words he never said. That is, that there would be some other being or force involved in the creation or sustaining of the world. This is the concept of Shitul, for partnership, as explained in the earlier part of the Divine Code. Humans were created in God's image, and to them God granted wisdom and the power of speech. Therefore, they must uphold truth. False speech is equivalent to saying that God's speech is also not a definite truth of oneness, and that it can be corrupted. God forbid. See Rambam, The Laws of Oaths, 12:1, and Ibn Ezra and Ramban on Exodus 27. except out of justified need, and that's discussed in under the laws of idolatry. So to say something, to swear something in God's name, to do so vainly or falsely is to desecrate God. Is to say that God would not matter to that person if he's willing to swear something using God's name. Would be to say that God's name is not important. And if he changes his word, if he swears on something and then changes it, it's to say that God, the existence of, if he swears something in God's name and then changes what he says, it's to say that God changes his existence. So God's existence is eternal, is a solid thing. Everything else in creation, it changes, but God's existence does not change. To change something that is sworn in God's name is to imply that God can change. And that would be an idolatrous concept. It would be unacceptable as being idolatry to imply that God could change. And therefore, if a person swears something in God's name, they're bound. Just as God is eternal, his oath that is sworn in God's name would also be eternal. Topic number 3. It is even forbidden to swear in God's name and in vain, that is, to swear about something for which an oath is unnecessary. As will be explained in the next chapter. Since it is a disgrace to the honor of his name to mention and to swear his name in vain. And see Rambam on Exodus 27. Whether one swears by one of the names of God or by one of his attributive names, it is the same as long as he clearly intends to mention God by this. For example, one who swears by the name of the one who swears by the one whose name is the compassionate, or by one whose name is the merciful, and the like, whether in Hebrew or any other, or in any way these attributed names are translated in other languages. See Shak or Dea 237-2 and Shokan Orak Harav Orakaim 85-3 concerning translations of languages. This is considered a vow in God's name. Rambam, the Laws of Oaths 2:2. And if one does so falsely or in vain, he profanes God's name. So swearing in a vain way, that means to swear something that is unnecessary to swear. It's just a silly thing, like to say water is wet. That would be an unnecessary swearing, because obviously water is wet. Nobody questions that. Therefore, to swear on something that's basically a meaningless thing to say, unless in some context that might need to be said, but it's an absurdity. Therefore, there'd be no reason in normal situations to make such a swear, to swear in such a way. Also, if these concerns about swearing would not only be if they're swearing according to an explicit name, it would also be the holy name or the attributive names that were discussed more in the earlier chapter on this. Also concerning the prohibition of swearing, see Tractate Sanhedrin 92a. The prohibition against Gentiles lying or swearing falsely is not learned from any specific warning, but rather from reasoning logically that it is an obligation for them to act properly by honoring God's name. See Likutei Sikot, volume 38, page 28, based on Ramban's commentary on Genesis chapter 6, verses 2 and 13. So it's not an actual, the prohibition of swearing is not an actual biblical prohibition. It's a logical one. Therefore, we should do it. We should follow it because it's logical. It's very obviously a logical thing that anybody should be able to see. Likewise, topic number 4. Likewise, any mention of God's name for naught is forbidden, since this disgraces the honor of God, and one receives punishment from heaven for this. Regarding this, it is written in Exodus chapter 20, verse 7, "You shall not take the name of God in vain. God will not hold you guiltless for one who takes his name in vain," meaning that a person remains guilty in his sin until he is punished by heaven for profaning God's name. That's Rambam, Laws of Oaths 12:1. It also says, it's in Deuteronomy 28:58, to fear the honorable and awesome name. Since from the obligation of fearing God, it is prohibited to mention his name for naught. That means for no reason. See Rambam, Laws of Oaths 12:1, in Mitzvot Hashem, page 382, Gentiles are forbidden to mention God's name in vain from the commandment to fear God. This applies specifically to the holy names specified for him that may not be erased, listed above in topic 1, in the early part or first part of today's reading. That was topic 2. And even in his names in other languages, that is the name God. And so, yeah. See Shulchan Aruch Harav Orchaim 85:3. Rabbi Zalman Nehemiah Goldberg notes that in the responsa of Rabbi Akiva Eger, volume 125, it is written that a divine name in another language other than Hebrew is considered an attributive name, and therefore does not infringe on the prohibition of mentioning God's name in vain. So in the case of swearing, making a unnecessary oath or swearing in God's name, even an attributive name, it would be prohibited. This prohibition of the attributive names would not necessarily be in the area of mentioning God's name for no reason, which is the topic 4. Would be just mentioning it in casual conversation when there's no reason to. In that case, it would have to be an actual one of God's holy names, and the attributive names would not be seen as part of that prohibition. But it still probably shouldn't be done. It would still be something inappropriate. It's just not on the same level of prohibition. In the case of just casual conversation. But there's no prohibition of mentioning God's attributed names in vain, such as compassionate, merciful, and the like, or other shared names, such as the English name Lord, which can refer to a person, that is, members of the British House of Lords, since they are not exclusively denoting God. See the responsa of Rabbi Akiva Yeager, mentioned earlier. That's volume 125, and Minchok Kinok Commandment 96. Topic number 5. What is meant by mentioning God's name in vain? This means mentioning a divine name for no need at all. However, to mention it in a way of praise or prayer is permitted. It is likewise permitted to bless one's friend with God's name by saying, God bless you, and the like. So to use God's holy name in these cases, in praise, prayer, or use it as a blessing, that would be acceptable. That would not be considered just common discussion. That would be a valuable discussion, and therefore would not be considered in vain. Shokanora Karav or Akaim 156, 2 and 215, 3. Therefore, one who erred and mentioned God's name for no reason should immediately praise and give honor to him, in order that the mentioning of his name should not be in vain. For example, if one says God, he should immediately say, blessed be he forever, or who is great and very exalted. See Rambam, Laws of Oaths 12:11. So if a person is having casual conversation, we're talking about the weather, and they mention one of the holy names of God, the person, in order to make sure that he's saying it in a proper manner, should attach it, make it into a sentence, and say bless, say something of praise, such as blessed be he forever, or he who is greatly exalted, and that way the mention of the name would be done in a proper manner. Thank you.